Welcome to FinFactor. I'm your host, Blaine Bertsch, co-founder and CEO at DryRun Cash Flow Forecasting Software. We help the office of the CFO leave spreadsheets behind, delivering clear and accurate forecasts to the management team. And joining me today is Scott Hollrah of Venn Technology. They help businesses save time and work more efficiently by connecting their software systems like accounting, ERP, and CRM, so data flows smoothly between them. Today, we'll explore the challenges finance teams face when dealing with data scattered across multiple systems and explore some of the solutions to the problem. Thanks for joining me, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
So I know we met just, like a week or two ago, and we were talking about this, and I was actually quite interested in this problem because we talk with CFOs every day. And it's amazing, like how many organizations have, it doesn't seem to matter, like if they have a really new shiny ERP, they got data over here, there, and everywhere. And it just doesn't talk to each other generally really well. And so like even with DryRun, it's like, well, we give them ways to get it in and adjust things because that's just the reality of the situation, right? But you take that, like a step further where it's like, okay, how do you get data all together? So I just wanted to actually first just dive into the problem that you see, because I know you've been at it for a while and have sort of led you down this path. What are some of the biggest challenges that these businesses face?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'm not going to get the stat exactly right, and even if I'm wrong, the illustration is the most important part. A couple of years ago, we attended the HubSpot conference, and their CEO got up and in her presentation talked about how, on average, mid-sized companies, and everybody defines mid-size a little bit different, have something like 240 unique applications in their organization. Yeah. And that sounds really high to me, but even if it's a dozen, that's a lot of applications. That's a lot of data. That's a lot of manually keying. That's a lot of export, manipulate, import, and pray and hope it all comes in the right way. And so, when you're having to do these things manually, number one, it's not the highest use of your time. You got hired to be a CFO or a senior level finance person for the vision, the strategy, not to manipulate spreadsheets and hope the data comes in the right way. Number two, you're not getting things into your system timely. So are you when you pull up your dashboard in the morning, are you looking at the most up-to-date data? And if you're driving business decisions based off of data that's days or weeks or months old, what good is that going to do you? And then think further downstream. If you get a call from a board member, and they say, hey, what's the latest on? Well, imagine having to answer the board member by saying, let me get back to you in a week. That's not going to go over very well. So we help organizations or the problem that we try to solve in the marketplace is we want to give people their time and their sanity back. And at the end of the day, we want to get them to their kid's soccer game or whatever it is, whatever the kid's soccer game is for wherever they're at in life. They don't need to be chained to their desk manipulating spreadsheets.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're like, in a lot of ways, we're solving the same problem totally differently, but the CFOs we talk with the same thing as it's the data and spreadsheets. We're not necessarily about like, we do get the data out, but we're about helping them use that data to forecast. Right. But like I remember one of our customers came in, I haven't shared this story in a while, but when you were talking about this, it kind of reminded me of it. And it kind of made me laugh is because she came in and she kind of snidely said, well, we have our team here and we get all of our data into spreadsheets and then we have our Friday finance party. She told it like, okay. And so it's like, Friday afternoon, they're finally getting, and then you're going into the weekend. Right. And, we got them plugged into DryRun. It turned to Monday. It's just like all of a sudden it's like at the start of the week, you've got live data, you kind of know where you're at. And it's a massive problem. That's like you said, it's not just it's out of date data. When you have multiple people involved, it's trying to get everyone to start on the same place. And then of course, how accurate is the data and how many places can you stumble along the way, right?
Can I tell a client story that's one of my favorites real quick?
For sure, yeah.
Worked with an organization, happened to be a large, well-known nonprofit. This was many years ago. and they were not at a point that they wanted to fully automate the integration of their donor data into their accounting system. And so, as kind of an interim step, we helped them define some export files so that they could easily get it out and move it in. Not the ideal, but for where they were at, that was what they had to do. And one of the things that we talked to them about was, hey, listen, based on the way you use this system, you've got to be very careful that you don't export the data multiple times or miss dates when you go run this. The first week or first 2 weeks after we set this up for them, get a call from the CFO. Hey, Scott, we didn't realize it, but Paul exported the data on Friday to cover these dates, and on Monday, Janet exported the data to cover these dates, and now we've got this overlap of donations. What do we do? And so, it's error prone, right? When you introduce people into this, you create opportunities for your data to be bad, and so automating these things and putting checks in place to make sure that we don't duplicate this, this transaction is really, really important.
Yeah, because at least you have a single source of truth. So if something's wrong, it's really likely at some point to get picked up, and then it can be corrected, and it corrects through everywhere. So everybody's doing something different and copy, paste, and enter this, and I'm just going to adjust that, and version control and everything else kind of goes with it, and it still shocks me. Like, I understand it's a challenge, but it still shocks me how many CFOs and finance teams I'm talking to that the system and the processes are just so counter to them running efficiently and accurately. And I guess probably why they're talking to us, but it's the norm. Like, I'm sure that would I be going too far to say it is the norm with mid-sized businesses to have this sort of issue?
You're spot on. And, the number of applications that we use is not going down. It's only increasing. And, at a minimum, an organization is going to have their accounting or ERP, and they're going to have at least one other application that supports some line of business that has a downstream effect for the finance and accounting folks. And most organizations have 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe more. And, think about the number of things that you have to do manually, multiply that by the number of systems, it gets out of hand really, really quickly.
Yeah. I had an implementation specialist. I think it was an ERP implementation specialist or someone along those lines a few shows ago. And I remember him saying the same thing, that telling me how many pieces of software that a typical company uses. And it was staggering. But then I started to stop and think, and like, we kind of have spreadsheets and we track, and we're not a big business. And it is amazing how many, not spreadsheets, different softwares we have. And it's amazing how many just even our small business has. And like you said, we have systems in place to get all together, but some of the systems don't talk to each other. And even at a small business level, it's a real challenge to kind of keep track of everything. And like I said, more and more systems, and I don't think the bots are necessarily the answer. It's going to take a lot. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of energy, and they may be helpful. But businesses don't change on a dime when they've invested a lot in their systems or processes. It just doesn't happen.
Well, and you said a really important word there just a second ago, process. And a lot of people think, hey, we're gonna buy this product, we're gonna hire this firm to come in and do this thing, and that's just gonna magically, solve our problems. And you have to make sure that your processes are dialed in. And one of the things that we've seen that can completely derail an integration project is that people can't agree on what the process is. I can't tell you how many times we've got into a kickoff meeting and we've got the stakeholders in the room, and we're drawing on the whiteboard, and okay, first person, hey, explain to me, walk me through this process. And we write it out on the board. And then the second person, raises their hand and goes, no, that's not how we do it. We do it like this. And then the third person says, you're both wrong. We do it this way. And so in order for these things to be successful, everyone on the team has to be in alignment, in agreement with what the process is or what the process should be in your future state.
Yeah, I imagine that any sort of initiative like this, like you sort of hit the nail on the head. It's that discovery meeting and the pre-work, all of the planning work, mapping everything out. That's what's going to make it a success. It's when it actually gets to the end and it's implemented. It's probably, frankly, like the easiest part once you truly understand what, and get everybody on the same page, because you know how important it is to get buy-in on everything too.
Yeah. Well, and the bots, as you said, only know how to do what they're told, right? And so we set it up this way, but then if you go start doing something a different way, you need to expect that your end result is not going to be what you desired when you set out to do this. And so as processes change, you've really got to think about, okay, how does this impact this integration? Do we need to go make changes, or do we need to leave the process, as is?
Yeah. We internally, we always call it show your math. And what we talk about is, even a lot of times it's not technically math, it's process, it's whatever, right? And it's just show the trail, because that's what a CFO, that's what the finance team needs to see to be able to trust something. Otherwise, if they don't know where something comes from, and especially the bot threw this number out, but where did they get that from? Like the trust falls apart really quickly.
Yeah, that's the trust but verify. I'm gonna steal that line. Show me your math. I'll check your work. This got me thinking about another thing that we run into, and it is very common for us to get a phone call from a CFO who says, "Hey, I'm overwhelmed. I've got these systems and I need an integration." Great. The number of times that they can't articulate what that integration needs to do is pretty surprising. And in order for these projects to be successful, you have to have really clear definitions around what integration means to you. And, where we kind of come in and help most organizations is that there's either a kind of off the shelf packaged integration for X that doesn't meet the requirements, or there's not one at all. And so, that gap needs to be filled. Just because somebody has a quote unquote integration between X app and Y app, that does not necessarily mean that it supports the process, that it supports the use case that you're trying to do. And so you really need to be clear on what that outcome is. So, for example, in our world, it's when this happens in system A, take that data from this place and put it into this object in system B. And you have to get really clear on what that is. Otherwise you're just, running in circles.
Yeah. And I could see the like a CFO coming in and saying, well, this is the end result. I know it's in here and this is the end result I need. Can they draw the path? And one of the, I guess, techniques we've used that seems to really help with that is this little bit of show us your math. Like we say, bring your spreadsheet and walk us through the entire spreadsheet. And we can just sit there and go, where'd that number come from? Where'd that number come from? Where'd you get that from? And just start to learn, and because a lot of times they haven't even really thought about it in a way. And you start to build this map out and figure it out. And it's that, again, it's like groundwork that's so critical for success. And if you miss something, if they miss something and you miss something, then it's like, oh man, now we got a gap and we got to figure out how to fill it. Right.
Well, and so I like the visual of the map or the path, because so often people come to us and say, can you help us integrate X and Y? Take Salesforce and Intact, for example. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, tell me about the things that are feeding Salesforce. And by the way, is there something that comes after Intact? Is there an order fulfillment system that we need to be mindful of? And then, upstream of Salesforce, I know you're saying you need Salesforce and Intact to talk. We can do that, but do you guys have, are you taking event registrations from Cvent and there's revenue that's getting recorded that's related to these? Okay, great. There's an impact all the way downstream. We got to make sure that the products or items are, have consistent IDs across systems, and where are you going to originate these products or items going forward? Is it coming out of the accounting system? Is it coming out of CRM? Are we going to manually create it in Cvent and then create it over? So it, you've really got to look at the whole picture when you're taking on one of these integration projects, because again, so many applications, there may be things that are feeding or things that are going to be downstream consumers of the data that you have to be mindful of in order for it to be successful.
So I'm curious, like I'm just taking a leap here, actually, just because I thought about while you were talking here. What happens when those systems or processes change? Like how is it? How should a company kind of keep track of some of those things? Like I imagine it's like, hey, you got to maintain what we've got because we don't break anything, but at some point we've got to start evolving. And how do you deal with those sort of changes in structure down the road?
Yeah, you know, hopefully people are aware of the integrations that they have in place, and are aware of the consequences of making a change in process. So I mean, I think it starts there, is just that awareness. And I, maybe this is a shameless plug, it's not intended to be, but having a really good partner that you can go to and say, hey, if we do this, how is that going to impact us? And if you've got a good partner, someone that you can rely on, they're going to be able to walk you through, oh, hey, that's no big deal. Or yeah, hey, if we do that, like, we're re-architecting this whole thing.
Yeah. This came to mind because it was a conversation one of my team had with just an individual. We were talking with a potential customer down the road, hopefully, today. And they have, I'm not going to name any names here, ERP wise, but that they were set up with an ERP and they're really struggling with it. And they couldn't get the information out that they need. And they're just kind of at a full stop. And it was kind of, I'll be honest with you, we were a little surprised because, like, well, we can get that through the API, and it actually, like, we're 10 steps ahead. And I don't really know. I don't know if it says we can actually get information they can't. That would shock me because the APIs are never as broad as the software. What that tells me is they likely didn't have that sort of scoped out properly, didn't really understand it, don't really necessarily know how to use it properly. And that's one of the big barriers they have. And so it like you said, it's getting the partner that, it's not about price. Like, that's the worst way you could pick someone. It's not probably, well, they're down the street. That's also not a great way. Picking a partner for whatever sort of technology need you have, how much do they go into depth of understanding your business and your systems and process and everything, and making sure that it's going to work? Because I was like, I felt really bad for them today. Like, well, I think we could help you, but I'm like, wow, that's not great, right? Like, that's not how it should be, right?
What you just said about, it's not about price. Somebody said something a couple of weeks ago that just totally, like, hit me between the eyes. We're redoing some of our legal agreements, and I'm seeing these bills come in from my attorney, and I'm lamenting the cost of these legal bills. And a friend of mine says, Scott, the only thing more expensive than an expensive attorney is a cheap attorney. And I thought about that, and I'm like, you're right. That's a really good way to look at this.
It is. It's do it once and do it right, sort of thing. And, back in my, years ago, my previous business was a creative agency, and we could always tell when it was year end, especially with the provincial government. We're up in Canada, so the provincial government, and you would get to end of March. That's the end of their fiscal year, right? Well, somewhere around December, January, they would come scrambling in and want a 6 or 12-month job in 3 months because they got budget they got to spend. And we would just every year, no,
can't do
just
it.
Go away. And you cannot believe how many times we got to usually about May, June, and the phone would ring. Hey, Remember that project back in December? Yeah, we totally buggered it up, but we have budget this year. We got to do it right. And it's just, and you try not to burst out laughing because you're just like, oh man, this is every year. Like,
Hate to tell you, I told you so.
yeah, it's just do it right. Just, do it right, plan ahead, right?
Yeah.
It's just, dangerous sometimes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to dig in a little bit on Venn, like, as I know this is, you guys are experts at this and very specifically in connecting these systems. Tell me a little bit about like how you help solve these sorts of problems.
Yeah. So little backstory on the organization. I kind of got really deep into the technology world through Salesforce, and was a Salesforce consultant for a platinum partner in the Salesforce ecosystem. And when I went off and started my firm, I would have told you that we were a Salesforce consulting firm that did integration work. And today we're an integration firm that does Salesforce work. And in the early days of the business, we would get calls from people that would say, "Hey, it's not Salesforce, but could you help us integrate X with Intact or whatever the other system was?" And early on, I was like, "I don't want to be all things to all people. Like, this is what we're going to focus on." And we said no. And after like a year of saying no, realized, wow, there's a major pain point out there. Like it goes well beyond just needing to get CRM and ERP connected. And so really opened my eyes to the pain and the opportunity that existed. And so today we've built a number of productized integrations. So, if you need to connect HubSpot with Intact or Stripe with Acumatica or Shopify with whatever, we've got products to do that. On the flip side, we get calls every day from people that say, "Hey, we've got this application that we've never heard of, and there's no off the shelf integration built for that." And so we'll come in and we'll tailor the integration to meet their needs. And one of the other things that it's really interesting is, while we do have all these productized integrations, we find that people want something just a little bit more. And so thankfully, with the state of APIs today, we can make these things do whatever people need them to do. And so, and again, for us, it's all about getting people to their kids' soccer game.
Yeah, it's amazing the time that goes down the tubes, and then with usually it's not just the CFO. It spreads through the entire team, and there's frustration through the entire team, and it's systems like that can be just absolutely magic.
Occasionally, if we're looking at a potential engagement, and if it's something that we can't really feel good about our scope within 2 or 3 sales calls, we'll do a paid engagement with them to come in and do the appropriate amount of discovery to put together a project. This was years and years ago. I was working with a group that was out in Las Vegas, flew out for 2 days to spend on site with them and really kind of map out all these processes and figure out, where does it make sense to tighten this up, and what do we need to plug in here. And at one point I said to my main contact, I don't know how you are still working here. Like, this has to be draining and exhausting. Like, I don't know how you do it. Before I had the opportunity to give them the proposal to come in and do the project, she had quit. And so yes, it's about efficiency. It's about helping people, focus on what they're best at, but it's also about sanity. It's also about satisfaction and waking up and enjoying what you do and not having to deal with this drudgery. And there's a true employee retention component when you can make their lives better, when you can make the technology work better. You're going to keep your people longer than if they're just beating their head against the wall all day, having to do all these things manually.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've over the years we've seen that so many times, and yeah, like I said, back even in my agency days, some of the things that we would do for interactives and training things and stuff. And it wasn't just always the end result. It was the people that are actually tasked with these things that are, overwhelmed, right? That's too often the typical. Well, this has been really great, Scott. How should people get hold of you if they want to find out? And tell me a little bit about, like, just a little bit about the who should talk with you, who's the right person to talk with you, and the challenges you solve, and how can they get hold of you?
Yeah, most of our conversations are with senior level people within the accounting and finance department, and they've got one or more systems that need to be connected with their ERP. Having said that, it doesn't have to be ERP centric. If you've got CRM and an e-commerce that need to be connected, we can do that. If you've got Stripe and it needs to be tied into, something else, we can do that. So if you've got applications that are not connected, they've got APIs, we can get in there and help make your life a lot easier. In terms of how to reach out, how to reach us, venntechnology.com, VENN technology.com. And if you get a chance, we wrote a killer song a few years ago and have an awesome music video out on YouTube. Go find our YouTube page. The song is called Integrate, Automate, Be Free. And it, tells the story of this person that's just living through this nightmare of dealing with data, and their family doesn't even recognize them anymore. And on comes the automation, and their life is forever changed. So go check it out.
I'm going to check that out myself, and I'll make sure I'll put that in the show notes. So I'll put all the related ways to find you in the show notes as well. So if you're looking to connect with Scott, pop in the show notes, go to venntechnology.com, and make sure you get hold of them. And thanks everybody for watching, for joining us this week. Again, if you're a CFO or part of a finance team and you're working with cash flow on a spreadsheet, we can help you. We can help you bring something crystal clear to the management team. And we're also going to give you a ton of control and flexibility so that you don't get forced back into that spreadsheet. So come visit us at dryrun.com. Thanks so much, Scott. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Awesome.
That was good.